Hey everybody, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a D&D player's experience with the worst DM they ever had. A story about a player that wants to roleplay a struggle cuddle, but doesn't think it's SA. And much more. But first, Luna wants to say hi. She's starting to get a little chonkers. But with that said, let's get into some D&D horror stories. Worst Dungeon Master I Ever Had, by Reddit user Ike Ildeman. This was many years ago, and was my introduction to Dungeons & Dragons. I knew the concept was simple. Make a character, roleplay, roll some dice. The Dungeon Master was a friend of mine, so I figured why not, and gave it a shot. It was a mistake. He started us at level 1, and the party consisted of me, a rogue, a female friend, paladin, and a male friend, fighter. The setting was simple, as it was a lot of first-time players in the group, the exception being the male friend, who had played since 3.5. We started in a tavern, somehow already knowing each other, even though we all had different backgrounds, and it wasn't explained how we did. There was a shady guy in the corner, who told us of haunting calls in the nearby woods that are only heard in the middle of the night. Our mission was clear: solve the mystery of the screams. We rested in the tavern until nightfall hit, and ventured into the woods. Eventually, we came upon a crypt with a couple of skeletons roaming around inside. Not bad for a first encounter, but DM did always favor paladins and had some secret conversation with the player, as if the DM was their god, thus discovering their weakness, and somehow had radiant damage. Mind you, we were all level 1, and paladins don't get radiant until level 2. Whatever, I chalked it up to me being a new player, so maybe he threw us a bone. The combat ended in one round. The paladin did all the damage, but we continued on. In the crypt was a mask. I'm a rogue, so I thought it would be in character to inspect for traps and steal the mask. There were no traps, and I took the mask and put it on. It was cursed. It was called the Mask of Love, and automatically made me fall in love with everyone of the opposite gender. We were all playing male characters, so it wasn't a big deal. Or so I thought. We left the crypt, and that's when we hear it. A woman's voice screaming a blood-curdling scream somewhere nearby. My character was forced to chase after the sound, as the curse made him fall in love with the woman's voice. So I ran, and immediately following that, a wraith manifested and cut my head off. No saving throw of any kind, and no death saving throws, so no hope of coming back to life. Outraged, the senior member of the party spoke up and said that that was utter BS, and that our options were, quote, find a cleric in a nearby city and pay him 5,000 gold for a true resurrection, or roll another character. This was our session 0. There was no session 1. Well, if anything, that sounds like that was session 1, and OP and the others didn't have a session 0. After a few months, he offered to DM for me again, saying that Homegrown was encouraged because he had some cool ideas that he wanted to share with us. I thought it over, and decided that because I'm a more experienced player, I'd give it another shot. This group contained me, a level 1 Dragoon from Final Fantasy, my wife, a level 1 Reaper using a full-length scythe, and a buddy of mine who had never played before, a level 1 Sorcerer. He dropped us on the top of a tower during an effing war between goblins and humans. And when I say war, there are easily 500 goblins surrounding the castle. So begins our one and only session with this DM again. We attempted to fight our way down the tower and into the courtyard. Sorcerer was trying his best with melee spells, like Shocking Grasp, Acid Spray, etc., but was ultimately cut down after, quote, fondling a goblin chief with Mage Hand because he attempted to steal the chief's weapon and failed the stealth check. He was subsequently murdered by said chief. Reaper was able to manage a critical hit and cut the chief's head clean off. We ran down the rest of the tower, where we got bum rushed by a horde of goblins, commanded by a captain. Reaper went down next, but not before attempting to have her character have unsolicited fun time with a group of goblins. First off, ew. Why do some DMs like to have that happen to player characters? And second, when would they find the time? They were all in the middle of a battle. I challenged the captain to a duel. As a dragoon, one of the starting feats was being able to triple your jump distance and stay in the air, slowing your descent. My plan was to jump, ready an attack, and land on the captain the following turn. We decided to take a quick smoke break, so we left the table, and I talked to the other players about my plan. I was going to jump, stay in the air to post disadvantage, and land the following turn, dealing 1d8 plus fall damage. This was basically going to be the strategy, and I'm not ashamed to say that yes, I was attempting to cheese the fight, and the Dungeon Master heard this. So I take my jump action and wait. The captain tried to shoot me and missed, so far everything was going to plan. I launched my attack, rolled an 18 to hit, and missed. The goblin captain then launched 2 action surges, attacked me 5 times, dealing double my health and damage in a single turn. He then said, "I heard how easy you thought this fight would be, so I made it harder. You just fought a level 5 champion fighter. Bet that cut you down a notch, huh?" We decided to never play with this DM again. I have DM'd since, and have been very successful as one, though not able to finish a campaign because of schedules or distance. He almost killed the game for me, but I realized that there's a lot of bad DMs out there, and I should try to be a good one. Yeah, I can see how a dungeon master like that could kill the idea of tabletop RPGs like D&D for new players. He definitely had a DM versus player mentality. First, killing off OP's character in the first game without any saving throws or death saves. Though I will say that putting a mask on that you find in a cursed crypt may not have been the best idea. Then, in the second game, basically dropping a level 1 party of 3 characters in the middle of a war, then killing off each character one by one, and even adding in that little detail for OP's wife's character. But the icing on the cake is when the DM said that he overheard OP planning his attack, and changing the goblin he was fighting mid-combat so that OP could not defeat him. It is a good thing that OP came out of this without a distaste for D&D, and has even become a DM himself with the intent of being a good one. So here's hoping that OP runs many great games. On to the next post. A player throws a fit when his character is not allowed to sexually harass another character. By Reddit user MaleficentAd6698. It was a D&D 5th edition homebrew campaign about investigating anomalous climate on a region. It's not rained for a month and crops are threatened. Relevant folks: Mather, a human wizard. Amara, elf sorcerer, who's got Revivify somehow, the only Revivify we have. And Mitch, the elf ranger. I was also a player character, but entirely a bystander to this horror story. So, throughout the entire campaign, Mather tried to flirt with Amara and coerce her into a relationship with him, including by the use of a love potion and charm spell. But since Amara's an elf, she's resistant to all of that. And according to her words, she doesn't want to get into a relationship with someone who's going to die just about now, referring to humans being short-lived in comparison to her. Instead, her character gets into a small, entirely non-disruptive romance side plot with Mitch. They play it well, and it has substance beyond the romance, as Mitch was raised by humans, and Amara is reintroducing him to the elf culture, since he is a little sore about all his friends dying of old age around him. Mather moves into trying to find out reasons why their romance does not make sense. Mitch is our resident ends justify the means guy, and has done quite a lot of killing, including a 10-year-old child that was possessed by a demon. And Mather berates Amara's player that her good character shouldn't be with someone like that. Amara's player just says, well, yeah, she is conflicted about that. The next night, Mather insists that he wants to take some watch. Now, we have 2 elves who can split the watch, while everyone else gets a long rest in 8 hours. Everyone is like, why? But ultimately agree. DM announces that Mather needs to roll a perception check. He does, and nothing happens. Mather announces that he will cast Hold Person on Amara and take off her clothes. Amara, so you're gonna rape her? Mather, outraged, no! Amara, laughing her ass off, how is that not raping her? Mitch, can I kill him? Mather, no, you're asleep. Mitch, I'm not. I thought you're sus, so I snuck out of the camp. You failed your perception check. DM, okay Mitch, roll your attack. Mitch is a bit of a min-maxer, and he has a stash of every single possible arrow the DM has dared to introduce to the world. He whips out his corrupted arrows that frighten good-aligned targets, and since he has 2 attacks, he deals 24 damage on Mather and frightens him. On his turn, Mather runs out of line of sight of Mitch and attacks him with a trick shot fireball. Remember where we are camped? That's right, a ripe, dry forest where it has not rained for a month. So we're almost immediately surrounded by a ring of fire. Mitch grabs Amara and they run the hell away from there, while the remaining 3 player characters, Mather, me, and the other guy who had nothing to do with this, awake to a rather gloomy reality. The DM says that he'll end the session here, probably because he does not want this to turn into a half-party kill and is trying to figure out a way to save us, and everyone just kind of leaves with a WTF. Please note that PvP is allowed in this campaign, and rape and sexual assault are not red-listed topics, so Mather didn't do anything wrong, per se, but he's still acting in a really deraily way. He couldn't just take no for an answer for once. Now he went and got 2 player characters killed who had nothing to do with this shit. Well, probably. Well, Mather definitely showed some that guy behavior here. Though OP did state that those type of themes aren't red listed in the campaign, which is fine. Everyone involved were adults, and as long as everyone's okay with it. But Mather still needs to realize that actions like that have consequences, and Mitch was the arbiter of said consequences. I mean, how did Mather not think what he was doing was wrong? That's more disturbing to me than what was happening in the game. Anyway, hopefully, the DM came up with some sort of way for the characters that had nothing to do with any of it to survive, and Mather learned some sort of lesson here. I think we should move on. Oh, guess I'm a slave now. By Reddit user, Just Another Valerie. Alright, so this happened a few years back, but I was in a college tabletop group. There was one particular dungeon master who ran games for most of the group, who we'll call George for the story. Anyways, I'm preparing for my first game with him, rolling character stats, figuring out my backstory, stuff like that. According to George, I'd be jumping in to replace another player who'd been team killed for being a constant thorn in the side of the other players. These players would be going to the Kenku Republic, or as George described it, Bird Russia, where my new character would be introduced. So I go Aracockra Artificer, and talked at length with the DM about how my character could own a gun store, and how he could work with the ruling government. Well, come my first game, and I'm told by George to wait while he gets everything ready for my character's introduction. The party enters the main palace and meets the ruler, who offers them an assistant on the quest that they're about to take for them. Instead of the introduction that George and I had worked out, my character was dragged out in front of the other party members, with feathers torn out and severely malnourished, with his legs and arms bound. This was not at all what we'd agreed upon. George, however, decided not to tell me that Aracockra were second-class citizens and that the ruler had taken my character for his own personal uses. Not a great start. The game continues, with my new party taking my character and leaving the palace. They decide to stop in town, to shop and restock, when out of nowhere, we're all asked to roll saves. Apparently, the Aracockra rebellion decided that they were going to have a magically enforced march in the capital city, and you'll never guess who auto-failed the saving throw. Oh, and don't worry about if my character was seen or not, as a photograph was taken with my character front and center. So now, my character is being hunted by the law enforcement, with the party appropriately reacting with grabbing my character and running like hell out of the city. The party, however, decides to continue with the mission, finding the rebel HQ, easily findable in the woods next to the capital, of course. As we travel through the woods, we're attacked, and I'm told by the party to hang back and hide, as my character is still weak from being, imprisoned. Well, George springs a new and awesome, in his words, mechanic, where whenever a party member is in an enclosed space, they need to roll a Constitution saving throw, my weakest stat. I fail, and George tells me, "Your character has been teleported into a pocket dimension, where he is tormented by his worst nightmares and memories. He cannot escape unless someone else lets him out." I didn't return for a session 2. Well, that was a session full of BS for OP and their character. To have a player go through all of the character creation and then have the backstory okayed, only to surprise them during the session that said backstory is changed, is already a dick move. But to change said backstory to something like that, and then string the player along in a series of mishaps and auto-fails, is super douchey. Then, what is really confusing is that the other players still decided to do the quest to oust the rebellion's hideout, when they are essentially outlaws now as well, as they escaped the city with OP's character. Perhaps the DM saying that the party team killed a player's character to get them out of the game should have been a red flag as well. And what the heck was with that crap about when a character hides in an enclosed space, they are taken to a pocket dimension? That was just really stupid. So yeah, I don't blame OP for not going back to that game at all. And hopefully, OP had some other good games in that club, with a much better DM. On to the next post. It's a Trap by Reddit user RNU. A few months ago, my significant other and I were invited by a friend for a board game night. Upon arriving, getting comfortable, preparing some food, and waiting for the others to join, we began discussing which board game to play from our friend's huge collection. To our surprise, our friend declared, "Oh, today we'll play D&D 5th edition. Wait, that's not a board game. Nevertheless, I was on board, but my significant other wasn't as enthusiastic, as she doesn't enjoy it. When the rest of the group arrived, we had a total of 7 people, including the DM. The DM came bearing a substantial chest filled with game-related items. He explained that he had prepared an extensive campaign for us. I inquired whether we could perhaps start with a one-shot adventure, considering that, except for me and the DM, none of the other players had played a tabletop RPG before. However, he declined, asserting that full campaigns maintain people's interest over extended periods, and he believed his captivating introduction would ensure everyone's engagement. Although I wasn't entirely convinced, seeing the majority of the group eager to give it a try, I didn't want to dampen the excitement. The next development involved the DM revealing numerous books from his chest, the player's guide, various supplements, and even an unfamiliar third-party supplement with a custom world. This world seemed quite dark, reminiscent of World of Darkness rather than Faerun. The DM distributed blank character sheets and announced that we would begin by creating our characters. I suggested the possibility of using pre-made characters, especially for beginners who might benefit from a quicker start. I asked if he had any pre-made characters available, though he firmly replied, "No, creating their own characters will foster attachment, encouraging them to stick with the campaign." Though skeptical, I refrained from arguing. He explained that everything within the provided books was available for character creation. Given the group's apprehension about the multitude of books, I advised them to opt for something basic from the core book. Since we only had one copy of the book, I would have brought mine if I'd known we were playing D&D. The character creation process became time-consuming. Participants also needed guidance on where to record various information, and completing the character sheets proved to be quite time-intensive, especially for novices who weren't accustomed to noting concise reminders, leading them to transcribe entire rule passages. Furthermore, the group desired a clear understanding of their choices, and since the DM's explanations were lacking, I took on the role of introducing the concepts. We also located essential resources online. While one person was transcribing their choices to their sheet, the others continued with their character decisions. In order to not block the player's guide even further, I made my choices only out of the third-party content, which seemed pretty overpowered. In the end, the character creation process consumed numerous hours, leaving everyone fatigued and honestly rather bored. At this point, the DM announced that we could commence the game, revealing that he had prepared a session lengthy enough to last the entire night. However, most participants swiftly expressed their limitations, citing only 4 to 5 hours of available time, suitable for a board game, which was already up. My significant other and I were also quick to depart. The DM collected all the character sheets and prohibited anyone from taking them home. The DM indicated his intention to organize the next session soon. However, a few days later, when he inquired about everyone's availability for the upcoming week, all were occupied and perhaps uninterested. This marked the last time the campaign was ever mentioned. The DM made no further attempts to organize sessions, a fact for which I'm quite relieved. As a side note, I have no insight into the campaign's theme, since the DM was unwilling to provide even a brief overview before we created our characters. While this situation might appear relatively mild by the standards of this subreddit, it's still noteworthy that someone managed to ensnare 6 people into wasting several hours for essentially nothing. This experience likely discouraged 5 individuals from ever trying the tabletop RPG hobby again. Now, while I can understand that the DM in this story may have been excited to run a D&D campaign, it probably would have been a good idea to discuss it with everyone that he wanted involved with it first, instead of springing the notion on them out of the blue when everyone was just expecting some board games. It's no wonder that this ended up going nowhere, as I'm sure the experience of making characters for the first time may have turned some people off of the game, because doing that for the first time can seem quite complicated. Like OP said, perhaps if the DM just ran a quick one-shot with some pre-made characters with the group, it could ease them into the game, and maybe open them up to the idea of running a full-on campaign. That way, it wouldn't have taken all night, and then the discussion on whether everyone enjoyed themselves, and if they would be interested in a campaign could take place, and even leave a little more room for some actual board games. But instead, like OP said, This probably turned some of the people off of the idea of playing D&D, which is a shame. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.